Religion,
theology,
diversity,
tolerance.
This is The God Show on News Talk 92.3 KTAR.
For the next hour, we'll be examining the important contemporary issues in your life in spiritual terms.
Our guests represent diverse areas of the world of theology.
Now, here's the host of The God Show, Pat McMahon.
Yes, and it is Sunday afternoon. No, this is Sunday morning. Excuse me. I'm terribly sorry. But see, that's what happens when you spend years and years and years in the studio. They don't open the blinds. You have no idea whether it's day or night. But you do know that it's Sunday, that it's time for The God Show. And it's time also to welcome back one of our regular guests for so long, a local internist in private practice here, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, who is also, I believe, the founder of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. Is that not true?
Yes, sir.
What was the original idea behind the creation of this organization?
It's now at a not only national, but we're international in our work. It's a foundation, a forum that's a non-governmental organization that looks at separating mosque and state in the Muslim consciousness. So basically Muslim reform, countering extremism, and basically to counter the idea of the Islamic State and the Muslim Brotherhood. Which
is, of course, a major focus of your book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, subtitled An American Muslim Patriot's Fight to Save His Faith. A number of years in the American military as a naval officer, an author, a physician here in the Valley of the Sun. Let's talk about what's going on internationally, because that certainly changes by the moment. President Obama spent 48 hours in Israel this past week, Zuhdi. To you, what was the value, if any?
Well, I'm still looking for the president to give us a doctrine about what his doctrine is in the Middle East. Every president, especially those in their second term, want to leave a legacy of a type of doctrine or ideology of their approach in foreign policy, and I still don't have one. I mean, to me, it seems like he was checking the box because he got criticized for not having visited Israel. And we're still looking for the substance of what's going to be his approach to a part of the world that is at tipping points from nation to nation. And Israel is our only real ally in the region, that he keeps telling them that we've got their back. But yet, are we leading? Even with our allies, we're leading from behind. And I'm concerned that we're leaving them vulnerable to an area that's becoming more and more, as much as I prayed and have been very happy to see the departure of so many dictators, and hopefully Syria will soon see that also, to replace them with Islamic states is not democracy.
Do you think that this president has a policy when it comes to the Middle East?
I don't think so. I think that his policy is to do nothing or as little as possible, basically the 10-foot pole policy. Well, I think he has not had real experience or writing in looking at the problems regarding the Middle East and historically. And so as a result, as the president, commander-in-chief, he's approached it as, the get out of Iraq ideology got him into office. And get out of Afghanistan now. So basically, in some ways, it's isolationist. But I don't think, if you look at his speech in Cairo in 2009, he basically had a lot of good comments in there about women's rights, about peace, but did not lay out a doctrine about the advancement of liberty. And at the same time in Iran, you had a green revolution happening. It came and went 3 weeks, and we did nothing to help the Green Revolution and those that could have possibly tipped Iran towards reform.
What might we have done?
I think we could have actually helped the millions that were in the streets, helped them unify, organize, and given them more open verbal. Remember, the Soviet Union knew they were going to fall apart when Reagan publicly called them the evil empire and upped the ante diplomatically and said that we want to see a world where the Soviet Union falls apart. We could have done that openly. We could have had a president that at the time said, there's a green revolution. The theocrats in Iran are theocratic fascists that are some of the worst offenders of human rights globally, worst offenders of religious freedom globally, whether you're Baha'i, Jewish, Muslims that are reformists are imprisoned and put in jail, as we've seen with case after case now. And he could have said this and let the people on the ground, if he really wanted to see, I mean, Obama's narrative, the president's narrative of why they hate us supposedly and why are the opinions of the West and America are so poor is that because our militaries were there, because we invaded them. That's not the reality. The reality of why they don't like us there is regardless of which party's in the office, they see us as only caring about our interests and not helping the liberals, the reformists. We only care about liberty at home. We don't care about it abroad. And we only seem to care about countries that affect our gas prices and our pocketbook. And we don't seem to push forward the heavy costs, not militarily, but civil society-wise, and actually, bucking the system of dictators and monarchs that are controlling and destroying those countries.
But Zuhdi, as an American Muslim yourself, having written about it, having appeared on just about every network show in the world of news as a moderate Muslim, would you not also acknowledge that there is hate in the Middle East against the United States because we are not a Muslim country? That after all, is the character that is presented of international Islam.
And this is, I think you hit the nail on the head, which is I just testified to Congress 2 weeks ago to Chairman Smith's subcommittee, Foreign Affairs in the House, and we testified on anti-Semitism globally and why it's increasing. And the reason they paid attention to that in my testimony was about the linkage between the rise of Islamism and anti-Semitism. And if you look at the number one media outlet in the Muslim world, it's Al Jazeera. Has 60 million people that watch it daily. The leading imam globally in Sunni Islam, which is 90% of the 1.5 billion Muslims, is Imam Yusuf Qaradawi. And this guy, as much as he talks about democracy and anti-dictatorship, he also talks about Jews in a very deprecating way, very, I believe, racist way, an offensive, hateful way, has talked about the Holocaust in ways not only of denial, but sometimes grotesquely positively. And this is a leading imam on Al Jazeera who has a show called Sharia in Life every week. So if you look at the spread of ideas, by the way, the Islamists that want to put forth, like the Brotherhood, only control 30 to 40% of the population. You also see rampant anti-Semitism in the far left, the secular left in Egypt and in Syria and across the Middle East, because there has been no advocacy for pushing the ideas of what is Israel, what is America, what are Western democracies? Are they all about anti-religion? The narrative, the real narrative that my parents embraced, like I talk about in the book, Battle for the Soul of Islam, is that America is pro-religion. It's pro-religious freedom, that we were able to practice our faith more freely here than we could anywhere in the world. That narrative is completely lost in the Middle East because they view us through the lens of Al Jazeera, through the lens of state-run TV there.
So what can we do about that? Al Jazeera is growing in the United States.
Yeah, thanks to Al Gore now for the unbelievable price for a channel that has no ratings of $500 million. They have access now to American living rooms. What can we do? Look again at how many think tanks in Washington, Pat, came out of the Cold War. From Brookings on the left all the way to Heritage and AEI on the right, these were all products of the war against socialism and Soviet communism globally. Now we need to have the same type of investment, public-private in America, to start to not say we're going to just project America as nice and not imperialistic, project the ideas of America, free markets, individualism over tribalism, women's rights, gay rights, all the things that, I mean, if you look at our website at aifdemocracy.org, you will see that this is not a partisan issue. Most of the Muslims actually working with me, even though I may be conservative personally, our website is not a conservative site. We have many feminists and many on the left that are working with us that are Muslims. It's just the American narrative is not fitting from the left because they use Muslims as a minority.
But you, and I know that this becomes almost a redundant joke because every time you're here, I say the same thing. You're the only voice that I ever hear, not just here, but on CNN and on Fox and wherever it is that you are, that happens to be espousing that particular moderate vision of Muslims in America and moderate Muslims around the world. So far, I've met one, and he's my guest, Zuhdi Jasser, on The God Show on News Talk 92.3 KTAR.
The God Show.
On News Talk 92.3 KTAR.
What a fascinating person this is, Dr. M. Zuhdi Jasser. What does the M stand for? I've never asked you.
Muhammad.
Oh, okay, well, I can understand why you keep it down to M.
No. It's I was called Zuhdi since I was young. It's not Muhammad's the most common name in the planet. So a lot of people with first name Muhammad use their middle
Yeah,
name.
but automatically, if you give your credit card to somebody in the United States, in Toledo, Ohio, they're going to give you one of these. What? What are you talking about?
As the book starts, my grandfather was Zuhdi Jasser, a known editor of a reform-minded newspaper, and I was called Zuhdi from when I was 1 year old.
You've read him in the Wall Street Journal, the Washington Times, the New York Post, across the country. He's been on every possible television show and radio show, but Zuhdi's true stardom began here at KTAR.
You were absolutely the first radio program I was on.
You know what? I didn't know that until you reminded me by writing in the book. The book, by the way, is a battle for the soul of Islam and American Muslims. Patriots fight to save his faith. Is that what your message was when you were in the Middle East recently?
Yeah, I'm blessed to have been appointed by Senator McConnell to the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedom, a commission that believes that in countries where religious freedom suffers, then so does the rest of the country, and security fall apart thereafter as the first freedom. And we followed what's happening in the Middle East very closely. We went to initially Bahrain and Ethiopia in December, and then in February we went to Saudi Arabia and Egypt. And I can tell you, to jump to Saudi Arabia first, they have for long been sort of the template of the worst offenders of religious freedom on the planet. And at the end of my book, I have a letter to my children, and I tell them that I will not be able to fix this problem in my generation, that ultimately reform and modernization of Sharia and Islamic thought is going to take generations. But the day that you can do our Hajj, pilgrimage to the most holy mosque that we know as Muslims, where Islam began, and it be surrounded by the freest Muslim country rather than the worst offender of religious freedom and women's rights, and a country where you can't build a church, a country where Christian groups we spoke to have soundproof walls to meet. They told us that in order to get together and assemble for their prayer services, they do it sometimes on Thursday night so that it doesn't spark attention, and they park their cars in distant neighborhoods so that they don't know they're meeting.
And where is this?
This is in Saudi Arabia. This is in Jeddah. It's in Riyadh, in eastern Saudi Arabia, in Dhahran. We spoke to some of the Shia minority that are oppressed and unable to practice their own faith tributes because the Wahhabis say there's only one way to practice Islam, and it's their way or no way, or you're an apostate.
Is that what Muhammad said? Is that what the Quran says?
That's not the Quran that my grandfather, the Sharia judge, taught me, or my parents taught me. No, not at all. That Islam is a personal relationship, that faith is not faith if you aren't allowed, given the environment, the laboratory in which to reject or accept your faith. That it's no longer faith, it becomes indoctrination from government and theocracy. But that's what Saudi Arabia is. It's basically a country that thinks that because that tribe has the keys to the two holiest mosques in Islam, that for some reason they have a right to treat the entire Arab Peninsula like they kept telling us, like the Vatican, which is a small city, and yet they think this entire Arab Peninsula with tens of millions of people on it should be treated the way the Vatican is.
What Middle Eastern country best represents your interpretation of Islam?
I think that question would be like saying which European country represents the best interpretation of Christianity in 1500 or 1400. The Muslim world has not gone through an enlightenment, Pat, or I should say a second enlightenment, to separate mosque and state, and that's why we formed our organization. I think some Muslim countries like Indonesia are on their way, Malaysia somewhat on its way.
Jordan,
the king is considered a benevolent king there, but certainly has not been pushing forth leaders that would strip ultimately the monarch from being the autocrat that he is. And ultimately, true reform, I think, will happen when you see these tribes that are in control turn it over not only to democracy. Democracy is not elections. Democracy is about a country that recognizes individual rights to be equal under God, so that they can have parties based in reason, not parties based in Islamic law. And that's the problem. Right now, there's been two choices in the Middle East. either secular fascism like monarchs or Saddam or Bashar Assad, these dictators like Mubarak, or the theocrats like the Muslim Brotherhood. And Jordan has been run by King Abdullah, who has a huge problem with, if there's any country that other than Egypt that has a problem with the Muslim Brotherhood, it's Jordan. And, he has not. And what's coming to roost today is that you've had a pressure cooker since World War II in every Middle Eastern country, where you had dictators suppressing and feeding. While they suppress it, they feed radical Islam. So Mubarak was showing the protocols for the elders of Zion every year on national TV, all the while he said the Brotherhood was the biggest threat. So he fed them their ideas of radicalization, all the while he said they were a threat and you need me as a dictator to exist. That juxtaposition, that toxic marriage between radical Islam and dictatorship has created, once you unroof the dictatorship and you have this pressure cooker that explodes, you're going to get Islamic law in Egypt. You're going to get the Iranian Revolution that you had back when the Shah left. Saudi Arabia would be the same thing. You need a third pathway, and that's liberty. And that's why our president needs a liberty doctrine. He needs a doctrine to say, we're going to help civil society, even if it means higher gas prices, even if it means less security up front.
But what might he have said this past week to Netanyahu in Israel that would have furthered some kind of anticipation of a doctrine?
If you listen to Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech in the UN last September, he identified radical Islam as the problem, that this is a age-old conflict between modernity and political Islam. Netanyahu identified that. If Obama could have at least publicly said that, we hear your pain, this is a global struggle, we're with you, that we are going to stand with you against the Islamists, that Hamas is the Brotherhood. The Brotherhood in Egypt is not going to be getting jets and hundreds of millions of dollars from us because we view them as the same threat as you view Hamas, because it's the exact same ideology. We will counter anti-Semitism. Do you know that the favorability rating of Jews in Jordan and in Egypt is less than 10%? And that is not a coincidence. It's because we haven't taken it upon ourselves to name names and name and shame those people that have been discriminatory and racist towards Jews and all minorities. And I think President Obama should have articulated that instead of just sort of making it appear that, well, we're good friends with you, Israel, but we are not going to articulate the ideas that you're fighting.
Where did the Jasser family grow up?
Aleppo. My father and mother are from Aleppo. And
tell everybody where that is.
It's in northeastern Syria. It's the second largest town in Syria. Syria is about 27 million people. 2 to 3 million live in Aleppo.
Are you more an Israeli enthusiast than you are Syrian?
No, my motherland is Syria. So Israel,
the Syria
to me,
that we know now?
The Syria that we know now is a country that is on its deathbed, that has been, Aleppo. Just last week we saw probable use of chemical weapons. We spoke to physicians there that recognized that chemical weapons were used against their own people. So
when we get back, I want to find out exactly how you view Israel and how you view Judaism as an American Muslim who just simply sounds like no other Muslim that you and I hear, other than these visits with Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He says the movement is growing, and he's written about it in A Battle for the Soul of Islam, talking about it on The God Show, News Talk 92.3 KTAR.
The God Show.
On News Talk 92.3 KTAR.
I know from having talked to you about so many of these things before, Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, and it never gets old because the latest book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, is a battle that you've been fighting for how many years now?
My whole life. I mean, the book talks about my struggles in college at the University of Wisconsin, trying to counter the ideas of the Muslim Student Association, and then through my years in the Navy, and how much that meant to me to help at Bethesda Naval Hospital put a crescent on the chapel there.
I think that it's fair to say that you're not a fan of President Obama.
I'm critical of his policies, and that I think they've allowed a appeasement of the greatest threat to the 21st century, which is Islamism, political Islam, and the rise in a quarter of the world's population 56 countries that could rise to basically create countries that see the world through a completely different lens from the West.
Do you think that he unconsciously, and I'm certainly asking you for just simply the theory from the book of Jasser, do you think that he unconsciously tends to stay away from Middle Eastern policies and politics because of all of the rumors about him being a Muslim and coming from that origin and with that name?
I don't think it. No, I don't think so. Because if he really was obsessed about that issue, he would actually make it a point to advocate for the Coptic Christians in Egypt, to advocate for the minorities and that are being just the drain of minorities, of non-Muslim minorities out of the Middle East has been unbelievable. So if that was really an obsession of his, I think he would have. I think at the end of the day, he doesn't view America's ideas as leading in the world. I think he sees our concept of liberty and freedom as not necessarily the right fit for everybody. And as a Muslim, that's one of the main messages in my book is that the Bill of Rights, the U.S. Constitution, and its message to me, Jefferson's papers on religious freedoms, to me, are very consistent with the Islam that I know. Is that a majority opinion? Not yet among the Muslim community. We need to work to that.
You include Jeffersonian thought in this book.
Absolutely. And I'll tell you, there's a concept that I believe that's been said before. It's called the bigotry of low expectations. And I have to tell you, I'm very concerned. We get this from both sides of the spectrum in America, which is that, well, they're Arab or they're Muslim. They need to have theocracies or they need to have monarchies, and they really don't understand freedom the way we do. Yes, there's illiteracy rates that are high. Yes, there's other problems. But I think left to our own devices, every human being across the planet wants to be free, wants government out of their lives, wants to have the ability to have a personal relationship with God and not the church or the mosque or anybody to tell them or the government to tell them how to practice their faith. And they want to be able to enter or leave it at will. And I think that's very human. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights dictates that, says that. I believe Islam teaches me that like every other faith does.
Zuhdi, you've been there. You've been in the Middle East. I mean, you've been to not only the country of your origin, but all these other countries. Have you been to Palestine? Have you seen the Palestinian settlements?
No, I've not been to the West Bank or Gaza.
If you see any of it, no matter where you are in this land that so many centuries ago was responsible for great mathematical thought, astronomical thought, the origins of so many concepts of science. And it seems since then, nobody's made anything except carpets.
Well, that's the sad part, is that I think that there's so many untapped resources. And unfortunately, oil has prevented them from using the resource between their ears. Instead, they're using the resources below the ground.
But that's just since petroleum. I mean, we're talking about for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years before that. What happened?
Well, the short story is that I believe there was a decrease in the diversity of Islamic thought. You had 4,000 schools of legal thought in the 10th and 11th century that whittled down slowly into what I call the quasi clergy that developed. Even though we have no clergy in Islam, just like Judaism, the imams became sort of a clergy and narrowed down the schools of thought down to simply 4 in Sunni Islam and then 4 others in Shia and other traditions.
Well, who are the Ayatollahs?
Well, the Ayatollahs came out of the Shia tradition, and ultimately that organized itself, and the Ottomans sort of solidified the inability to critically think. So what happened was not only an Islamic thing, but there was a loss of critical thinking, a tribalization of society. Bernard Lewis talks about this very well in What Went Wrong, and I quote him in my book. He has a book called What Went Wrong, and sort of what happened to the Muslim world that was leading intellectual thought globally, and the Jews describe their time under Islamic Spain as being the golden age of their era. Maimonides did his best work with them, and then that disappeared into now what is a place in the world in which there's very few products or new thought that comes out of.
When did the secondary role of women begin?
It's interesting that the loss of rights among women, I think what happened was you had if you look at my own family, my mom, my wife, and so many others, we believe in the equality of men and women. And yes, there's differences that are described in the Quran, etc., but there's an equality and partnership. The subservience of women, I think, was part of this erosion of critical thinking, the erosion of some of the core principles, what I think are what have been lost and need to be resurrected, and some of the fundamentals of our faith to come back, which is reason. If you look at Muhammad Yunus won a Nobel Prize of Economics in 2005. Why? Because he gave microloans to women in Bangladesh and Pakistan, and once they were able to pay for their own living and build their own businesses, they told their husbands, they told their fathers, you're interpreting the Quran wrong. This is not the way I interpret it. You know, we even see honor killings here in Phoenix. I talk about some of that in the book. And these things are not necessarily aberrations. Honor killings are to women's rights in Islam what terrorism is to the Islamic State and political Islam.
Explain honor killings and what the concept is religiously, and at least that interpretation of Islam. We read about them in the newspapers, but they are so totally and completely abhorrent and so foreign to our way of thought that it's so difficult to conceive. You need an explanation.
Yeah, I mean, it's dishonor, but obviously there's a tribal concept that if a woman dresses immodestly, dates a non-Muslim who she couldn't marry, drinks alcohol, does things that are prohibited by the faith, by some interpretations or common interpretations, that she would dishonor the family, and that then gives the brothers or the father the right to imprison her, abuse her, or kill her. So honor killings
run over her in a parking
exactly
lot.
al-Maliki, and I hope people in Phoenix and across the world start to realize that Noor al-Maliki is one of thousands that die as a result of fathers or brothers who take it upon themselves to supposedly write the family name in the name of what they think is Islamic pride, and that's not Islam. It's not the faith that I learned, and ultimately part of Western freedom was us living in a society knowing that kids, teenagers, adults have the right to make their own mistakes, and we as parents should help them grow and mature with that.
You know, what you have said on this program so many times, what you've said today, it seems as if your voice, the voice of the gentleman you were talking about giving microloans to women, to begin their lives as business people and successful people in their societies and their cultures. All of those things are met with this kind of applause. It's like the sound of one hand clapping from another religion, instead of stadiums filled with people on their feet cheering. And that has to be incredibly frustrating to you, especially when, if I find email messages, if I find comments and responses to news stories on my computer that call you as a Muslim an animal today, just today as I looked at my computer, Arabs and Muslims, nothing but animals, subhumans, these are the phrases that I read today on my computer. What kind of a long road do you have in your journey ahead of you?
Well, this is the thing, is that if we're going to erode the bigotry and the supremacist sort of concept that Arabs and Muslims deserve the lot they have right now, we need to do it by repairing our own house, by showing that we can repair our house and not blame others and find conspiracy theories. And what's happened is, even as a minority in America, most Muslim organizations that claim to speak for us do so from a position of victimization, that they're blaming others, that somehow this is all about us coming to America to demand our rights rather than coming to America to absorb. We have a saying at our Muslim Liberty Project of students that we have at ASU and around the country. We say we are Americans that happen to be Muslim, not Muslim that demand to be Americans. And I think if you're going to erode sort of a lot of the noise out there, we need to show that this is a Muslim problem that needs a Muslim solution. And we're not embarrassed to say that we have a lot of work to do to erode the illiteracy and the fascism and theocracy that's growing. And it is growing. The Middle East is in a tipping point. And you mentioned something that I think brings it home, is that a lot of times in America, we're very ethnocentric, and we think that everything is just about America. With Twitter and Facebook, things that we do here can change the world. Facebook and Twitter are Western technologies that have changed. The Arab awakening, not the spring, the Arab awakening was about those technologies. Those were Western technologies that they embraced and didn't care where it was made, but they used it. Similarly, liberty and freedom, if we can operationalize it in a way that doesn't appear to be Western, but yet is an idea humanly that they would want, just like they use Twitter and Facebook and YouTube, we can then help them change their world, because so many of us here understand freedom, but haven't been able to translate it into a way that gets absorbed in those countries that need it. Because we're living in a world right now that is a global village. So either we can sort of give up, which I think the president has done, and say, well, let's just let them figure it out on their own, or we can take it upon ourselves to say, how is this village going to work economically? How is it going to work to get them the individual rights that they've been lacking for so long?
All right, so you've got a minute and a half now, Zuhdi. The pressure is on. I want you to create a message, email, tweet, whatever, to a little girl who's 13 years old in Saginaw, Michigan, say, comes from a moderate family. They want to embrace everybody that deserves embracing as far as they're concerned. They don't care what religion you go to, what mosque, what church, what synagogue. But she just read about the shooting of the little girl in Pakistan who just simply wanted education for young women that were her age, and she was shot on the bus. Now, not only surviving but thriving in England as a result of the medical care she's getting. But in the next segment, I really would like you to please communicate with that American little girl who read that, who saw her picture on the cover of Time magazine, and for many, that little girl, that 13-year-old girl who was shot, has become one of the heroes of the 21st century. I really would like you to try to formulate a message so that those of us who are not Muslims, but who want to reach out to the Muslim world without feeling as if we're going to get our arms cut off, I'd like to hear what you would have to say to that single little girl in Saginaw, Michigan, or wherever she might be in this country, to explain how that could happen in 2013 and what that little girl in America might be able to do to change it. This is Pat McMahon. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser is my guest on The God Show. News Talk 92.3 KTAR.
The God Show.
On News Talk 92.3 KTAR.
Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, so busy with his work on behalf of what he feels is what Muhammad had in mind for what Islam was supposed to be, a battle for the soul of Islam, an American Muslim patriot, his fight to save his faith. Our guest, Dr. M. Zuhdi Jasser. It's amazing that you have time with all the appearances that you make in media and before live groups at auditoriums around the country, that you have time to practice as an internist here in the East Valley.
It's still the way I put bread on the table, and what I love to do is take care of patients. So I'm still working full time. This is sort of on the weekends and in between.
So if somebody calls you for an appointment, they're not going to be in the waiting room for a week and a half?
No, no. I do sometimes run a little late, but no, it's I love my patients.
The little American girl says, wait a minute, hold it. I identified with this little girl who was shot by a militant, by an extremist, because she wanted education for herself and her friends. How do you respond to that little American girl I was talking about?
I would tell her that this is a sign of a deeper problem, that as a doctor, just like all of us in America, we see disease, we want to treat it. This is a symptom of a much deeper malady, and that malady is the conflict between modernism, the West, that believes in freedom and human rights and women's rights, and a society that's still holding on to medieval beliefs that men should dominate women, medieval beliefs that religion, that government is God rather than government should just be to protect the nation. So these are concepts that if she wants to bring an end to that, to join us and help us in reforming, that this is not just a Muslim problem that we just need to blame Muslims, that we need to help build platforms for organizations like the American Islamic Forum for Democracy, and our youth project, our Muslim Liberty Project, that is actually so many young women that realize that they don't have a voice to be able to be heard at the mosque and in other Muslim organizations.
Are Catholics and Methodists accepted in that organization that is designed to create the change you're talking about?
Absolutely, because one of the issues is and as I educate people about our struggle, is that the West gets it. Christians and Jews and others get this because you've been through this in your history. Muslims have not gone through this. So this is why, I spoke to a women's group in Seattle last week about my book, and I told them, I said, as you have Muslim women in your communities that you know at the hospitals or law firms that you work at, engage them and bring them in and show them, empower them on how to be independent, powerful women so that they can lead their communities into reform.
Do you have any Jews?
Absolutely. We don't have a faith test for who helps us. It's all about American ideas. And the basic question I answer in the book is, can a good American be a good, can a good Muslim be a good American? And I think the America that we know, the e pluribus unum, out of many one, this concept, we can't have faith filters. Secular humanists, to all faiths, need to work together to believe and push forth this universal declaration of rights, human rights, individual rights, that Muslims, I believe, as a majority, need to come to terms with.
Does Israel have a right to exist from the Book of Jasser?
Absolutely. I mean, when I visited in 2006, I was struck by not only how normal it is, but there's 1 million Muslims that live there. When I visited Yad Vashem, I was attracted to the display of a Bosnian Muslim family that protected Jews during the Holocaust. And
Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum.
Exactly. And we spoke to a Sharia, people don't realize there are Sharia courts, Islamic courts in Israel where Muslims are allowed to practice their faith. And,
but even in Israel, you have to acknowledge the fact that human failings will continue to dominate other people's thoughts and activities, no matter where you are, no matter what the culture is, because there's bigotry and prejudice and extremism in Israel.
But at the end of the day, Israel has a Knesset that argues law and concepts based in reason and operates in many ways no different than any other democracy in Europe and the West. And this is, I think, the shift that happened somewhere in the 17th, 18th century with the massive revolutions that occurred across Europe before that and in America. And ultimately, these are the revolutions that I hope and pray are happening in Syria and in Egypt that aren't going to happen overnight. That ultimately, yes, you will always. America went through a civil war and still has pockets of bigotry that exist, but still the majority of our population will do anything to help one girl that falls into a well, to speak out against bigotry when one person says something that's clearly anti-Semitic. In the Muslim majority countries, we don't see that yet. You have a president of Malaysia that says some conspiracy theory and nobody bats an eye. And this needs to change, and it can only change when the leaders of the free world speak up about that.
Well, some of the leaders of the free world in Congress do the same thing with conspiracy theories and wacko concepts. You'll have to acknowledge the fact that it certainly isn't just unique to the Middle East.
That's true. And, this is the beauty of democracy. As Churchill said, it's the worst form of government, excluding all others.
All right. What is your realistic hope now? Your realistic hope for the future of Iran?
Well, my realistic hope is that we can somehow cut off and destroy their ability to form nuclear weapons, number one.
We, America?
The West, Israel, America, Europe, NATO, to make sure, because take a suicide bomber and give him a nuclear weapon and a government, and that's what Ahmadinejad and that government becomes with a nuclear weapon. Mutually assured destruction like we have with the Soviet Union is not the same with Iran that becomes armed with a nuclear weapon.
And Iranian young people are not represented politically or ideologically by the Ayatollah or Ahmadinejad.
Not at all. And that's why we could be helping more civil society change there. The rial in Iran has worsened 50% decrease in value in the last year. Their economics are falling apart, and they keep doing things to say that they're bolstering. They did a defense move with their ships outside in the Gulf near Iran because they're trying to, unify their population in a Machiavellian way against foreign enemies like Saudi and the Sunni governments. So they have a lot of problems, and they could be on the verge if we actually would help those reformists on the ground.
Your realistic thought how in your lifetime that Egypt may change?
I think if we allowed them to fail, right now the doctrine out of the White House seems to be that we don't want the Muslim Brotherhood to fail because that'll be economic disaster. I would say the opposite. Let them fail so that the people will never elect them again. That's what the Iranians are trying to do now. So if they fail, then you can start the problem. When I was in Egypt, we met with women's groups and secularists. They don't know what idea to unify around. So you have the Brotherhood that has 25% of the vote, and then you have all the others that divided into 30, 40 parties, 2% each, and they couldn't unify. And that's why they need to unify around this battle for the soul of Islam is about freedom and liberty, to unify like we did in America around the idea of religious freedom.
And that's the title of the book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam. And with less than a minute, I mean, I'm talking 30 seconds here, the immediate future of Syria.
The immediate future is a military solution, Pat. It's not political. Assad needs to leave. His generals need to leave. We need to arm the rebels. We need to begin to give them the means to destroy the government that's there and the military that's there, so that then after that's all done, you can start to put together the political pieces. But we can't stay this one out, because if we do, the Darwinian strong horse will win, which is evil, which is Assad.
Quickly, how do people get in touch with you?
AIFdemocracy.org. AIFdemocracy.org is our website.
And you can find out more details, of course, by reading the book, A Battle for the Soul of Islam, that we at least tried to capsulize for you on The God Show on News Talk 92.3 KTAR.